In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace your front brakes, pads, and rotors on this Chevy Silverado 2500. Let's install these TRQ brakes. Let's remove the wheel. If your truck has these center caps, you're going to want a 22mm socket, same as for your lug nuts, and remove all of these plastic covers, unthread them to pull the center cap off. If your truck doesn't have this, of course, just skip this step. Now take off all of your lug nuts with the same socket, 22mm. Now remove the wheel. From the back side of the caliper, you have the slider pin bolts here and here. They're covered with little rubber grommets that will have to pop out. Take a pocket screwdriver, gently pry these off. You will have to reuse them, so try not to break them. If you do break them, you're going to have to replace them because they seal up all of this slider pin area through the caliper, so you'll get rust buildup in there. Take a 10mm Allen and unthread the slider pin. There it is. The lower one has this rubber bushing on it, or the rubber sleeve, so keep that in mind. You want to put them back where they came from. Let's do the same on the top. This one does not have that rubber sleeve on it. Now pry the caliper up and off of the rotor and the pads. There we go. I'm going to place it on top of this upper control arm, and I'm going to use a bungee cord to strap it down so that it doesn't fall and it's not putting any pressure on the brake hose. There we go. Let's remove the pads. Simply pry them out of their bracket. Sometimes they're stuck and you might need a little pry bar, but these are nice and free, so take them out. The caliper is held on with two 21mm bolts, and that's what holds it onto the knuckle, so let's take them both out. Also, while I'm here, I'm going to pull this boot with the washer off before it falls down. The other one already fell, and I have it. I'll show you exactly how to clean those, but let's take the caliper off now. Leave this in a couple threads so I can hold it while you take this one out. Take this bolt out and remove the caliper bracket. A T30 Torx screw holds your rotor onto the hub. Remove it and then remove the rotor. Sometimes these are rusty, so if it is, tap it with a hammer and that should help it break free. That's exactly what I was talking about. There we go. Take the rotor off. My hub is very clean. It's been recently greased up, so I'm just going to give it a quick inspection. If yours was rusty, you would want to wire brush it or sand it down depending on how severe it is. Mine is in great shape from what it looks like. I will, however, try to wipe this down a little bit just to give it a quick inspection. You don't have to get it looking nice and shiny and new if you have to clean it off. What you're aiming for is to remove any ridges, any rust buildup that has accumulated over time, because that's what's going to cause braking issues. And if you get it nice and flat, even if it looks a little bit discolored, that's okay. But at this point, I will recoat it with some fresh anti-seize, and then we can install the new rotor. When you put this stuff on, just make sure you put a thin coating on. If you put too much, it'll actually start flinging out as you drive, and that is what you don't want. You want to avoid that. On the center part here, where the rotor sits, add some anti-seize so that it doesn't seize onto this ring around the hub. I'm going to install the rotor backwards just for a second so we can clean it. Take a clean rag and some brake parts cleaner. I have the performance rotors here, which are coated with a special coating that is not oil-based. However, I still like to clean it up with brake parts cleaner to get any of my fingerprints off and any oils or greases that have potentially stuck to it. But if you get the flat rotors, they will be coated with some oil, and that you definitely want to wash off. You don't want that getting on your brake pads. So rinse it down with brake parts cleaner and wipe it off. That's nice and clean. Let's flip it over and do the other side. When you install it the right way, line up the set screw hole for that little T30 Torx bolt with the threads on the hub side. Let's clean this side off as well. Take your T30 bolt and thread it in. Doesn't need to be very tight, just snug. Over at my workbench, I'm going to remove the old anti-rattle clips off of the caliper. Just pry them off like that. And I'm going to use a wire brush to clean up the caliper. Depending on how much rust you have here, you may need to use a flat file or a little piece of sandpaper or even a wire wheel on a drill. Looks like mine is cleaning up very nicely actually, so that's good. Not looking to get it shiny, I'm just looking to remove the rust. Now you want to put a very thin layer of silicone paste or brake grease on here. I'm using silicone paste that is rated for brakes. If you use it, you want to make sure it resists high temperatures, otherwise it will melt as you drive, and that would not be good. Don't put a lot here because it will squeeze out into the center here where the rotor rides, and that would be an issue. Now take your new anti-rattle clips and clip them on. Make sure you put them on the right way, so this hook needs to go towards the outside, and then the taller piece towards the center part here, shorter piece on the front. Just like that. And now let's flip this over and do the same exact thing on this side. Okay, this is ready to be installed in the vehicle. However, before I install it, I like to inspect and prep my slider pins. I'm going to do this one at a time. Take the slider pin, wipe off any old grease that's on it so you can actually take a good look at it. If they were seized when you took them out and you managed to actually take them out, you're going to want to inspect them thoroughly to see if they can be reused. If they have a lot of pitting or rust buildup, you're going to want to replace them because they will not function as they should. These are great, so I'm good to reuse them. I'm just going to wipe off all the old grease and reapply new grease, but not yet. I'm going to wait until they're ready to go on, otherwise they're pretty much going to be covered in grease and it's going to make a huge mess. So do the same to the other one. This one's good as well. I'm going to inspect the boot thoroughly to make sure it's not swollen. A lot of times these boots will swell, or the rubber bushings, and it will actually cause the pin to bind up inside, and that would not be good. So that's another important reason why you want to use grease that is rated for brakes. It will not swell up rubber. Having said that, these are looking great. Get the caliper bracket on here, line it up, install the 2 bolts. Let's bottom them out. The torque for these is 221 foot-pounds. Okay. The inboard pad will have the wear indicator sitting on the bottom of it. Make sure you put that in its proper spot. Pry out on these clips here so you can get the pad to slide in. It should slide in really smoothly and it should move around. If it gets stuck and binds up, that means you didn't clean up the bracket enough and it's actually squishing the pad in, which is going to cause issues with your brakes. So make sure you take it back off and clean it if that's the case. The outer pad does not get a wear indicator. It's just a plain pad. Same thing, pry out on those retainers, push the pad in. This one also moves nice and smooth, so that's perfect. In order for the caliper to fit over the new pads, we're gonna have to compress the pistons in. I put the caliper on top of the knuckle here, so it's a little bit easier. And you can use whatever tool you have that will compress pistons. I have this dual caliper depression tool and a pad here just to take up some of the space. And now I'm going to slowly press this in. Very slowly compress it. Make sure it's going in nice and smooth. If it takes a lot of force to push, it might be a bad caliper. Could also be a brake hose. Compress both of these all the way in equally. Looks like I've reached the maximum compression here, so I'm going to remove my tool. I'll take that old pad out. On this ridge is where those boots ride. So what I'm going to do now is take a wire brush around the perimeter of where the boot sits, just because it's a little bit rusty. And I want to get all this debris off so I can properly seal up those boots once I put them on. If you have a lot of corrosion inside of the bore, clean it out. Mine looks spotless, just greased up because the pins were still nice and smooth when I took them out, so I'm not worried about it. I'm going to wipe this off. If you want to, you can stick a rag through here and just pull it back and forth. That should clean out the bore nicely. Take a little bit of that silicone paste or brake grease, put it on the ridge, and then put this boot back on. Be very careful if you end up using a pointy tool. Oh, it popped off. Try again. You just don't want to damage the boot. If you damage it, you need a new one. Okay, once this is on, do the same to the other side. Now take your caliper, slide it over the pads, make sure these boots go on to where they need to be and don't pop off from being pushed sideways, which can happen, so pay attention to that. Now, let's get some grease in here and the slider pins. I'm going to take some of that same silicone paste, grease everything up. I like to put it into the bore because as you slide the slider pin through, it's actually going to push it right into the boot as well as lubricate this entire area. So that's why I do it this way. Of course, I'm still going to lubricate the pins. Take some silicone paste or brake grease, whatever you're using. Put a thin layer on the slider pin. And remember that this one with the bushing came off of the bottom. So I'm going to slide it right back in here. The other one came off of the top. I already lubricated that one. Put that in, and now let's tighten them up. The torque for these two is 77 foot-pounds. All right, let's put those two little caps back on. In order to help seal everything up, I'm going to add some grease right to that ridge where they sit. And all you have to do is just push them in. They should seat into that groove by themselves. There we go. There we go. Make sure both of these are seated well. Put the wheel back on. Start on all 8 of your lug nuts. Bottom them out in a cross pattern, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 140 foot-pounds. 140 foot-pounds in a cross pattern, here we go. Double check them. And of course, if your truck had one of these center caps that screws onto each lug nut, put it on, and with that same 22mm socket, tighten it back up so it doesn't go flying while you drive down the road. I don't recommend using a power tool on these because they are very delicate. You can easily strip out the threads if you're not careful, and it will fall off at that point if it's not held on properly. All right, those are all tight. There you have it. Take it for a road test, and don't forget to get an alignment.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.